Hi, I'm Eric Anderson. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, taking a closer look at the medical marijuana debate. We'll introduce you to the San Diego scientist and how his research sparked a debate about how the drug is regulated.
Charger fans chanted "Save the Bolts" at last night's only public forum with the Citizens Stadium Advisory Group. I'm Peggy Pico with a ramped-up deadline for a new stadium plan and the next steps. Then, renowned Egyptologist Dr. Zahi Hawass joins us for a passionate conversation about discovering King Tut and why ancient Egypt is so popular.
It is a grave wound in the life of the church.
Catholic Church of San Diego names its new leader today. The promise from the new bishop reflecting on the church's dark past. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Dwayne Brown is off tonight. A group that's supposed to pitch a plan for a new Charger stadium asked the public to weigh in yesterday.
Save our Bolts! Save our Bolts! That's right. Save our Bolts!
More than 2,500 fans showed up last night at the Citizens Advisory Group's public meeting. They showed their pride with a rally in the Qualcomm Stadium parking lot. Some San Diego residents say a new facility should happen right there at the Q, and some are willing to pay to keep the Bolts from moving.
And I am a lifelong Chargers fan. I actually drove down from LA with my parents as season ticket holders for over 15 years. I'm not sure I'm willing to drive to Carson the other way, though. So, you know why we're here.
The advisory group will unveil its plan sometime in May. Peggy Pico, meanwhile, takes a look at the impact of last night's forum on moving forward.
Joining me with the next steps is Adam Day, chair of the Citizens Stadium Advisory Group. And Adam, remind us of the goal of last night's public forum.
Well, the main goal was to hear from the public their good ideas about what site they prefer for a new multi-use stadium and then how to finance it. It's something that's never been done before in 13 years. We've never had a public forum, and so it was real exciting. There was a lot of enthusiasm and passion in the crowd. We had about 3,000 people come up, and it really helped us to inform our recommendations that we're going to be making to the mayor very soon.
And out of those 3,000 people, you said a couple hundred maybe spoke. Did you hear any new ideas?
We did. We heard some interesting ideas, like when we tear down the old stadium, let's sell off the seats and sell them for about $100 a piece and raise $7 to $10 million. We also heard ideas like Green Bay when they formed a crowdfunding account and raised $70 million. A lot of testimony about the county's involvement and who should vote. So, yeah, it was very, very helpful to our committee, and we look forward to making our recommendations soon.
There's a lot of focus on building the new stadium where the current Qualcomm Stadium is in Mission Valley. Is a downtown site still being considered?
We're considering two sites. That's what the mayor asked us to do. And last night's testimony will help us make a recommendation. It's certainly true. The overwhelming majority of the testimony last night supported the existing location. But we're looking at pros and cons of both. And there's different constraints, legal, environmental, fiscal, and all of that's going to go into our recommendations back to the mayor.
The Metropolitan Transit System actually said last week that the preferred downtown site wouldn't be available for 5 to 7 years. So why is it still on the table?
Well, you know, there's been 9 or 10 different locations that have been studied in the last 13 years, and it's really these two locations that have been left standing. And so the information from MTS is not really new news. I think that's been out there for quite some time, but it's important for us to take that into consideration before we make a final recommendation.
So it's not a deal breaker at this point?
Well, I think it's something that has to be considered in the overall grand picture. I mean, as I said, both sites have pros and cons. Some of them are more costly than others. You have to consider other partnerships that might be available, and the cost of land, that's an important consideration as well.
Money seems to be the biggest challenge here. Is the advisory group actually taking into consideration County Supervisor Ron Roberts' financial plan or any other specific plans you've heard so far?
Well, we look forward to all kinds of good ideas, and there was a lot of good ideas last night. Supervisor Roberts has some great ideas as well. I think ultimately our recommendation isn't really rocket science, but it's more about packaging different revenue streams together to make the right fit. As the mayor said, it needs to work for the city's budget, it needs to work for the taxpayers, and it certainly needs to work for the Chargers as the primary tenant, but there will be other tenants in a new multi-use facility too, and so we need to look at all revenue options that are on the table.
Will the site plan actually be announced before a revenue plan or a financing plan, or will they come at the same time?
Well, we look to have all of our work done by the middle of May, but I think we're building momentum and we're developing a consensus within our committee as to whether or not we should pick a site sooner rather than later. That way we can focus all of our energy on the revenue financing plan. So I think we may have some other announcements to make in the near future.
Well, the Chargers announced, of course, a possible move to a shared Charger Raiders stadium. It's hard to put those two words together in Carson. But now there's a move that move actually is going to be financed by Goldman Sachs. How can San Diego compete with that kind of offer?
Well, we acknowledge that LA is a different market, but that doesn't mean that San Diego doesn't deserve a NFL franchise. As I said earlier, and as speakers spoke to last night, we just went through an effort to save the Opera in San Diego, and the Opera is very important to the fabric of San Diego, and so is NFL football. We think Goldman Sachs would be a great partner with the Chargers here in San Diego as well. So we encourage them to work cooperatively with the Chargers in finding a solution with us and here at the city.
Now, economists say, listen, that these football stadiums and these types of things don't have a big economic impact, and this one won't either in San Diego. So what are some of the other reasons you heard as to why to keep the Chargers here in San Diego?
Well, I think there is certainly a positive economic impact. It may not mean that it makes a profit per se for the city, but it certainly needs to be fair to the city and the taxpayers. But there are other benefits to having a multi-use facility beyond just dollars and cents, and we heard a lot of that last night. It's a very important institution. There's a lot of activities besides football that will occur in a modern, efficient facility, religious, political, community groups. So it's a tremendous asset. We're the 8th largest city in the country, and we think we deserve a facility that stands on its own.
All right, Adam Day, thanks so much for the update.
Thank you.
San Diego's Roman Catholic Diocese is getting a new bishop. Robert McElroy officially takes over in mid-April as the spiritual leader for the county's million Catholics. He replaces Bishop Cirilo Flores, who died last September. McElroy is a leader in the church's social justice wing. He also says the church is still struggling with the child abuse scandal that tainted churches around the country and led to a multi-million-dollar settlement here in San Diego.
We can never relax on that question. We can never think we have done enough or that we have put it in the past. It is a grave wound in the life of the church, and the church has taken tremendous steps to change its whole way of doing things, and that's wonderful. But we cannot relax in those efforts. We cannot say we've reformed enough.
McElroy was an auxiliary bishop in San Francisco, and he carries an academic pedigree that includes degrees from Harvard and Stanford. The battle over the One Paseo project in Carmel Valley is not over, in spite of last week's 7-2 San Diego City Council vote to approve it. From our North County Bureau, Allison St. John has more on a case of dueling signature-gathering campaigns.
So yes, the opponents of the One Paseo project are not giving up. They've launched a petition drive to get a referendum to the City Council to either repeal their vote of last week or put it on the ballot. The campaign is being paid for by the shopping center across the street from the project, the Del Mar Highlands project. They're threatened by the 25,000 square feet of retail space in the mixed-use development, and they've already spent $1.5 million to oppose it. But community members do say that it is not just a corporate battle, it's also a community issue. They argue that the City Council's action could set a precedent for other neighborhoods who are afraid of dense growth and pass projects like this that would change the character of neighborhoods. They have 30 days to collect 34,000 signatures from city residents, and then the City Council will decide whether to adopt it or put it on the ballot. Could be in June, or it could be a special election. Now, meantime, the developer of the project, Kilroy, has his own referendum. He's also collecting signatures about the future of the Chargers in North and East County. Apparently the motivation for this is to reduce the number of available signature gatherers so that makes it more difficult for the opponents of the project to collect signatures. This will not be something that people in North County get to vote on. I did hear today from the mayor of Solana Beach that she will fight to support the opposition to One Paseo because North County residents oppose this because of the traffic on I-5. But whatever happens, they will not get to vote on this. This is purely for the citizens of San Diego.
KPBS North County editor Allison St. John. Heading to the president's desk tonight, a key bill to fund the Department of Homeland Security. The House of Representatives approved the $40 billion spending measure. Critics are upset that this bill left out provisions that would have reversed the president's immigration policies. San Diego medical marijuana patients could buy their pot from the city's first legal store next week. KPBS Metro reporter Taryn Mento says the cooperative's owners are taking great care to exceed the minimum requirements.
You can see the sign for a green alternative just after turning off Roll Drive and into an Otay Mesa shopping plaza. Standing out front, owner David Blair explains how he is adhering to strict city rules that are specific to cooperatives.
There is a height and length restriction.
Blair says a green alternative will be ready for business in 7 to 10 days.
This is the entrance to the dispensary.
All of his employees recently passed a background check, one of the final requirements before opening. But for some of the regulations, Blair says meeting the minimum requirements wasn't good enough for him.
Everything that the city asked us to do, we tried to double it.
The city requires an armed guard be on duty during store hours, but Blair's extending that to 24 hours a day.
We want to protect our neighbors. We want to protect our patients, we want to protect our employees, and of course ourselves.
That includes bulletproof walls, windows, and doors. Plus, a green alternative will use an outside lab to test its products for things such as mildew and mold. The city says that's optional.
So we're taking all kinds of measures to make sure that our patients have not only safe, but immaculate access to their medication. This is the dispensary.
The SDSU business ethics lecturer says he wants to not only be the first legal medical marijuana cooperative in San Diego, but the best.
We really want to set the bar very high because we want to remove the stigma associated with cannabis.
Blair expects to serve 7,500 to 10,000 patients in his first month. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
California became the first state to legalize medical marijuana back in 1996, but is marijuana actually a medicine? Researchers who were trying to answer that question have faced an uphill battle against public opinion. KPBS science reporter David Wagner profiles one San Diego scientist whose work helped clear some of the haze.
Back when California voters passed Proposition 215, scientists didn't know much about marijuana's medicinal properties. Some state legislators wanted to change that, so they approached UC San Diego's Igor Grant.
My recommendation was, look, establish a center or a program, really, to study this. And it'll cost you some money, but these studies have not been done, basically.
Soon, Grant found himself in charge of the new state-funded Center for Medicinal Cannabis Research. It was an enviable position. Lots of scientists would love to do experiments using pot, but it's been incredibly difficult to study. The Drug Enforcement Administration lists marijuana as a Schedule I drug alongside heroin, LSD, and ecstasy. It's a category reserved for drugs with no medical value. Grant says his work would not have been possible if he'd proposed it directly to federal agencies.
Without the state of California saying, yes, we support this kind of work, we probably would never have gotten federal approval.
With California fully behind him, Grant worked with scientists throughout the UC system to complete a series of small human trials. A federally sanctioned marijuana farm at the University of Mississippi provided their samples.
It would be a joint, basically. Okay. But very professionally rolled, I might say. It looked like a cigarette. My understanding is they had an old cigarette rolling machine.
The joints all looked and smelled the same, but not all of them got subjects high. These studies required placebos, so some joints contained no THC, sort of like the pot version of decaf coffee. Grant managed to convince DEA agents that these samples would not leave the lab.
The DEA has to come locally and say, well, where are you going to store it? Let's look at your research pharmacy. In one case, they said, well, is that safe bolted to the floor?
Subjects smoked their joints in hermetically sealed rooms with no ventilation leading outside. Grant and his colleagues had to jump through lots of regulatory hoops to pull off the experiments. But Grant says once they were done, the findings were surprising.
I kind of expected, well, we're going to have a few studies that'll say yes and a few that'll say no, and then possibly at the end of the day we'll still be arguing. But in fact, every single study showed benefit.
Grant says it's now well established that marijuana can soothe neuropathic pain in patients with diseases like HIV/AIDS. It can reduce spasticity in multiple sclerosis, and perhaps obviously, it can stimulate appetite in underweight patients. Grant says there's now more than enough evidence to justify taking marijuana out of Schedule 1. Other scientists agree. The American Academy of Pediatrics also recently called for rescheduling. Even the U.S. Surgeon General has said that marijuana can be helpful in some conditions. Alex Kreit, a professor at the Thomas Jefferson School of Law, says learning more about pot will be difficult without rescheduling.
It makes it very hard for researchers to get access to it. There are a whole host of hurdles that Schedule 1 drugs come with as far as research that Schedule 2, 3, and so forth just simply don't have.
A DEA spokesperson said the agency can't reschedule marijuana without action from Congress or the FDA. As for any negative effects, Grant says the jury's out on how marijuana can affect teenage brains still under development, but he sees no clear evidence of long-term damage in adults.
It's completely incongruous that it's sitting in Schedule 1 with, other useless, dangerous drugs.
Grant says marijuana belongs in Schedule 3, alongside small doses of codeine and some appetite suppressants, but he'd settle for Schedule 2. David Wagner, KPBS News.
KPBS videographer Nick McVicker helped produce that story. New documents released Monday confirm that Cory Briggs' wife was vice president of his law firm while working for an environmental consulting company that was under contract with the city of San Diego. Joining me now is iNews Source reporter Brad Racino to explain what that means. Brad, refresh our memory. A lot has happened in the last week, and what does her being vice president of Briggs Law Corporation have to do with anything?
Well, yeah, a lot has happened. So to back up, last week we published an investigation that found Cory Briggs, who San Diegans know as a very powerful environmental attorney, has a wife. That was news. Then we found out that his wife, Sarichia Cacciatore, worked for Helix Environmental Planning, a consulting company under contract with the city and county of San Diego. Looking at Helix's work and Briggs's lawsuits, we found some overlap, including at least one project that his wife worked on. Now, we've confirmed that for the past 20 years, she was also vice president of her husband's law firm. So to sum up, she was part of the law firm that was suing the city over her employer's work.
And how did you confirm this, that she was the VP?
The city attorney's office went to court last week to ask a judge to unseal a document, arguing that it was responsive to our Public Records Act request. Briggs fought the release of it. The judge rescheduled a hearing for tomorrow, but yesterday we got it. Cacciatore's own lawyer sent it to us. It turned out to be a deposition that took place just a few months ago in December. Cacciatore, Briggs' wife, was the one being deposed because she was named as a member of San Diegans for Open Government, which is a group Briggs represents in court a lot. In her deposition, both Cacciatore and Briggs stated that she was vice president of his law firm, among other things.
And what else was in the deposition?
Well, for one, Cacciatore started out by saying she wasn't married to Briggs, that she'd never been married to Briggs. Then later, she reverses and calls him her husband. When she's questioned about it, she says the two are together, quote, religiously. But multiple real estate documents filed with the government do state that the two are husband and wife. She then goes on to say that she has no idea what San Diegans for Open Government does and that she didn't know she was a member. Lastly, she says she's never done, quote, any work as an environmental planner in connection with other cases that San Diegans for Open Government may be involved in, end quote. But we've found that's not true.
So what's next in all this?
Helix's response to the city's attorney's office, they actually sent that today. They said they were aware of Cacciatore's personal relationship with Briggs, but they were not aware of her connection to his law firm. They also said she should have disclosed that.
iNews Source reporter Brad Racino. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks.
I'm Gwen Eiffel. On the next News Hour, we sit down with the director and producer of a new documentary on college campus rape. That's Tuesday on the PBS News Hour.
More than 100,000 people have visited the King Tut exhibit that's at the Natural History Museum in Balboa Park. It opened last October. Tonight, the museum's president and a famed Egyptologist joins Peggy Pico for a conversation about the popularity of ancient Egypt.
From his signature fedora to his discoveries at the Giza tombs and Valley of the Golden Mummies, his many documentaries, lectures, and books, including his newest, Discovering Tutankhamun, From Howard Carter to DNA, my guest, Egyptologist Dr. Zahi Hawass, is clearly a passionate promoter of ancient Egypt. Also joining us is another fan of Egyptian antiquities, Dr. Michael Hager, President and CEO of San Diego's Natural History Museum. And Zahi, so much is known about King Tut already, but people can't seem to get enough. Why do you think that is?
Because of the mystery of this king. It's amazing. The tomb was found on November 4th, 1922, 5,398 artifacts, gold and silver. Then we still, every year, know something about this king. How he died. Many people thought he was murdered. But now we have evidence that he was not murdered. He died while he was riding a chariot. His family, with DNA and CT scan, we found the members of his family, his father and his mother, for the first time.
Unraveling this mystery, and Michael, the Nat exhibit, it consists of scientific replicas of the objects that were found in King Tut's tomb, like Zahi was saying. Remind us of what makes this exhibit unique, because they are replicas.
Well, the original artifacts, when they travel, there are about 50 of them. There are over 1,000 artifacts here. But I think the exciting thing is the thrill of discovery. You get to see the tomb with things piled one on top of another, just exactly as Howard Carter saw it. And that thrill of discovery comes through, I think, to the visitors as well.
And I have seen it, and the scale is actually spectacular. You can't really get that on video, so when you're standing next to a sarcophagus, it's really interesting. Now, Zahi, as beautiful as these recreations are, why don't the real artifacts travel outside of Egypt
We
anymore?
did. I brought King Tut exhibit 50 objects only from the 5,000 objects, small ones, because we needed to make money for the construction of the Grand Museum in Egypt. And that exhibit was opened in 2005 in Los Angeles. Other 5 cities, everywhere, I brought to Egypt $140 million.
So they don't travel outside anymore?
But I did announce after that, this is the last time that the real objects will come to the States.
Because?
Because it's fragile. We're afraid of anything can happen to them. And we prefer now, when I looked at this exhibit at the Natural History Museum, it's amazing. Looking at the children, looking at the treasury room, the burial chamber, the coffin, that touch the objects. It's really something beautiful education for the children and adults.
And do you agree, Michael? Do you think replicas are better because you can get the scale a little bit better or more, or are they better?
Well, you get to see things in context. So you get to see the whole burial process, and you get to see all the goods that were in the tomb for the afterlife. You don't get to see that kind of context in the real exhibition. Yes.
Recently, ISIS terrorists released a video that allegedly showed them smashing ancient Assyrian statues. Before that, in 2011, during the uprising in Egypt, it was reported that some treasures from the Cairo Museum were reportedly damaged or lost. So what's being done now to protect Egypt's treasures?
Number one, I have to say that we lost only 54 objects from the Cairo Museum. I returned most of them. We are losing only now 17 small objects. Number two, this ISIS, what they did with antiquities, it will make their end soon, because you cannot destruct culture. What they're doing, it shows to the world that they are idiots, stupid, and those kind of people will never stay at all. Number three, I want to tell you and assure you that we as Egyptians are protecting the Egyptian monuments now. We have a strong government. I'm asking all the Americans to tell them that Egypt is safe, and I ask them to come back, because we need the money from tourism to restore the Egyptian monuments.
And as you mentioned, just to be clear, a lot of those artifacts were brought back. Is there a specific tomb or treasure in ancient Egypt that you want to discover or others want to discover?
Yes, of course. I was working in the Valley of the Kings to try to discover the tomb of Ramses VIII. That really I know where is this tomb. And also, next door, the tomb of Ankh-es-in-Amun, the wife of Tutankhamun. That is my dream, to discover her tomb.
So he is so passionate and so full of dreams, Michael. His lecture tonight is sold out, actually, at the Nat. And with these record visitors coming to see the exhibit, do you think we could expect an extension of the exhibit and or more Egyptian antiquities coming our way?
Well, I wish. It's scheduled to leave on April 26th, so people really need to get down there and see it.
But I will tell you that Dr. Hawass is in the film Mummies 3D, Secrets of the Pharaohs, so they can see him there as well.
All right.
And this exhibition was brought to San Diego by Bank of America, and we're pleased with their sponsorship.
All right, we got a little plug for them. Michael Hager and Zahi Hawass, thank you so much.
Thank you.
In honor of Balboa Park's centennial celebration of the 1915 Panama, California exposition, families in need will be able to enjoy it. That's because park institutions came together to make a massive donation, $1 million for free passes.
What we have here today are all the museums working together because they realize they all benefit when more San Diegans have access to their cultural offerings.
Mayor Faulkner has two big reasons for wanting as many people as possible to have access to those exhibits.
A, it's cool, but B, from an educational standpoint, to make sure that we're giving as many San Diegans the opportunity to come and experience it. I think that represents exactly what we should be doing.
City Council members will select community organizations to be in charge of handing out the passes. There is a change at San Diego's airport. New signs in front of public bathrooms. John Hicks shared this Twitter photo with us. It shows stick figures of a family plus a new figure to be interpreted as half man and half woman. The airport is also including a message saying anyone can use the restroom regardless of gender identity or expression. Tonight's stories are on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back here again tomorrow night. Have a great evening.